Hello, everybody. So I want to welcome you to this new series that I'm doing. It is the Bible Unveiled. Um, so I'm creating this timeline, and this also has to do with understanding maybe possibly a geomagnetic excursion that might be taking place. We're not in one yet, so there's no like countdown to the events. Um, but I'm going to be putting excursions in here as well as with estimated dates. Um, as I go through certain documents. So this will involve understanding the Bible a little bit deeper and as I was doing this research, I ended up, becoming Gnostic because I saw certain things that I was just kind of like, this is very interesting. And Gnosticism makes more sense to me. Um, Even if you look at, you, uh, things that the Jews have done, especially with the Kabbalah, even stated that there was an entity that was before God, that basically created God. And the entity that, well, the monad created, um, that became God was actually ignorant, kind of thought that he was the only God, Yalbadeoth. And it was Yalbadeoth that created this universe. And then chose a specific race um, that that was more or less like chosen rulers. And so I'll ignore that for now, but or I wouldn't ignore it, but I'm not going to talk about it that much right now. And um, I don't have any hatred towards the Jews. Um, this is all for the purposes of research. Hold on. So yeah, just to be clear, this is all for research purposes. um, I think we've all just been manipulated, and I think that there's a certain group of people, a small group of people, that infiltrate religions, races, and stuff like that, and they get us to turn against each other. So the Jews aren't evil, and so is no other race. But they fill us with ideas that turn us against everybody and divide us, because a population divided is a lot easier to rule than one that is united against them. Because if you knew the truth, you probably wouldn't be for them. And that's a lot of things that I've been trying to expose, is how things are together and what is the truth. Now, truth, that is completely up to you. I'm just posting information um, for my novel, for myself, for other people who think it might be interesting. But so right now I'm looking at this small sliver of time in the Earth's history. And these are all guesstimated dates, but I believe that an age is 2,150 years. Um, and I think there is something significant that happened on 2012, like I could feel the death of something and a beginning of a new age. And so I went with 2012 as a date for Aquarius, which means that Aquarius will move on until 4,150 162 CE or AD, whichever you prefer. Oh, and some of this is gonna align kind of like, because the main reason I'm putting the excursions in here too has to do with, I believe that excursions actually happen about every 2,000 years, or about around every astrological age, and I'm trying to understand that too. So if any of you have any excursion dates that you'd like to hand me to look into, I will. I'll put them in there. Um, um, until I go through a thorough research to actually understand more about them. But for right now, these are some of the things that I got. So, because I don't believe this micronova theory, especially that it's going to happen as soon as they say it's going to happen, like in 2040, 2050, because we haven't even reached an excursion point yet, even though they claim that we are, we haven't. And I think it's just part of a psyop that's trying to keep people in fear. And I'm trying to get people out of fear. And just because Ben says no fear doesn't mean nothing. Because when you start your video with showing the ocean going over continents and boats like going everywhere and all that kind of stuff, like that movie 2012 and the disastrous chaos and everything like that. No, that is beginning your like video with a fear-based thing to get people's attention. You just struck fear in your audience saying, hey, you're about to die if you don't listen to me. And I don't like that. That's controlled by fear. And I understand all this. And whenever I see control by fear, I rebel. Because that's not the way how you should be presenting information, through mechanisms of manipulation and control. So, I'm doing this so that we can look at things in a different way. So, okay, so like I said, Aquarius, 2012 to 4162 CE. Right now we're in the present day. This has just started, 2025. So Pisces was around 136 BCE to about 2012 CE. Okay, I don't have anything in there yet, but we'll get to that possibly later. Now we have Aries from 2020, from 2284 BC to 136 BCE. So you have this excursion happening around 675 BCE. Now, I haven't really looked at this in depth, and it was a small one. There's certain points that I declare like small excursions compared to the big excursions, which the big excursions I find happen on the fixed signs of the zodiac is my guess. It's my guess. Which those would be Aquarius, the age we're in now, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. But let's move on. So we got the age of Taurus right here, and the documents that I'm going to go over here soon, this is approximately where we are in this document. We're in the age of Taurus, and maybe beginning a little bit into the age of Aries. Actually, yeah. And Noah's flood, from what I can tell, what aligns with the stories, happened in 2347 BCE, and Taurus was in 4432 to 2284 BCE. And this is when I feel like Noah's flood happened. And I'm going to get into that evidence. You can disagree with me if you want to. That's cool. I don't mind. Then Gemini. I don't have anything in there yet, but we got 6,580 BCE to 440 4,432 BCE. And then we move into Cancer. And Cancer is 8,728 to 6,580 BCE. And the main event that might have happened there was Göbekli Tepe. And then we get to Leo. So Leo major events did happen during that time. So you got Leo was from 10,876 to 8,728 BCE. And here we have the possibility of Göbekli Tepe. I haven't looked into this at depth, but we got somewhere between that time right there, 9,600 to 8,200 BCE. And then we got the Younger Dryas event, which was happening around 10,875 to 9,675 BCE. And then also the Gothenburg excursion from around 11,725 to 10,325 BCE. So, and these excursions, from what I can tell, aren't like a wham bam situation. I've seen reports of it taking anywhere from a little over 1,000 years to as small as this one right here that happened more recently, about 2,700 years ago, that took place between it was 140 to 270 years. That's why I don't believe Ben too, because he's talking about it happening really fast, and at the moment I just don't see the evidence for that. But we'll dig deeper. And then we got Virgo, which was, I forgot to switch these two. It should be 13,024 to 10,876 BCE. I should have reversed those. Hold on. Okay, that's a lot better. I reversed it. Okay, so in Virgo, there's the possibility of the meteor strike that happened probably roughly around 10,900 BCE, the Gothenburg excursion from 11,725 to 10,325 BCE. You got the Miyake event that happened around 12,350 BCE, and the warming event that happened before that, or that began in 12,675 BCE. Okay. And what I think's interesting right here is right now we're in the warming event that seems like it might go into an ice age. But we haven't had the Miyake event. But these happen we still got a good 2,000 to 3,000 years possibly before any of that permanently falls through. But you can start to see certain changes. And these are kind of signs that we're looking for. How long do these things happen? And things of that nature. So, anyways, alright, well, let's get into the document. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish it all, but before I get to it, I'm going to tell you what inspired me to do it. There's things about DMT and seeing through walls and seeing some kind of hidden code that looked like a combination of Hebrew, and Chinese characters, like combined. And we know that the Tower of Babel happened after the flood of Noah. Well, this would explain it, and this is why I believe that um, Noah's flood happened when it did, was because of the documents we're about to start reading. I have more documents on this, but there's so much similarities, and so this is gonna be, there's three different PDFs I'm gonna show you, and I'll look these up from Google Scholar. In the research, I typed in, I think I typed in like the Bible or the Tower of Babel and China and Shang-Di, or maybe I just use Shang-Di, and we'll get into that here soon. I know you're probably like, what's a Shang-Di? But um, now it's time. Okay, so here's the title of the document. It's Ancient Chinese History in the Book of Genesis. All right. Um, okay. So, introduction. How could there be sophisticated civilizations on Earth prior to the creation of the world? So, let's get into this research. Oh, I don't know if I read the title, but Ancient Chinese History in the Book of Genesis. You can definitely just type that title in and probably look it up on Google Scholar, and you'll find this available to you. If you don't know how to get it for free, when you click on the link, it'll show different sites, and it'll even show like a PDF or something like that. Just click the PDF. If you go to the site, there's a possibility you might have to pay. But with this one, I don't think so. I had this one delivered in my email. I think if you just give them your email, it's free. And there's three of these that come along with this. But anyways, okay, so this talks about how in the past they thought the date for creation of the world was generally accepted by those who believed that it was indeed created by God at around 4000 BC. But this James Ussher, Archbishop of Ireland, famously dated the grand event to midday on Sunday, October 23rd, 4004 BC. But that's, you know, but it kind of fell into ridicule with all other things going on, because how could you talk about civilizations being sophisticated prior to the creation of the world? They, some Berlin school had astronomically dated the beginning of the Egyptian dynastic history to 4240 BC, which was earlier than creation. Okay, so, and then we got Meyer's fictitious long-range calendar. Meyer's belief, I'm going to read this quote, that the ancient Egyptians had actually used the Sothic period of 1,460 years as a kind of long-range calendar is pure superstition with no evidence in support of it. In fact, Meyer had to go to classical texts to get some of his key information, to Theon, an Alexandrian astronomer of the late 4th century AD, and to the 3rd century AD Roman author Censurnius. Forgive me if I pronounce anything wrong. But maybe I'm not going to read this whole thing. So, what's it getting to? Meyer, therefore, was able to determine from there, using multiples of 1460, his Sothic series of AD 1040, 1320 BC, 2780 BC, and 4240 BC. However, that guy had not actually connected the 1460-year period with Sirius. His evidence contradicts that of Theon, according to whom the conclusions of a 1460-year period had occurred in the 5th year of the Emperor Augustus, 26 BC, as opposed to the Ciceronius testimony that a great year had commenced in AD 140. Okay, so the date of 4240 BC is the unification of Egypt under Pharaoh Menes became the accepted norm until wiser heads prevailed. However, while the date for Menes currently stands at 3100 BC, it's a date that I'll have to add, maybe, considerably lower than both Meyer's estimation and the era of creation. The broad pattern of Meyer's artificial Sothic arrangement still prevails. But even 3100 BC is about a millennium too early for means I have argued in. Okay. I might have to look at these maybe at some point. Maybe, I don't know. But right now, so today a more fertile ground for critics may be ancient China, which, like Egypt, once again, has known many dynasties. So, hold on. Okay, so this person talks about they were lecturing in Hong Kong, China, when a scholar raised an objection. The Chinese have a document history going back many thousands of years, much earlier than your dates for creation and the flood. We have known dynasties and named rulers. The Bible must be wrong. Okay, so critics have said the same thing about the Egyptians and other histories to try and prove the Bible wrong, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so according to Morris, reliably documented Chinese history does not even precede 2000 BC. So, this is what's interesting. This caught my attention. The solution lies in the examination of the earliest Chinese dynasties. Actually, precisely documented dynasties go back only to about 2000 BC. The first true dynasty was founded about 4,000 years ago by a leader remembered for having sweetened the waters, making the land habitable after widespread flooding. The 10 listed dynasties before that, however, were of a different sort, with very long lives and questionable details attributed to them. So, you know, if this sounds suspiciously Noachic and reminds one of the great Genesis flood. And I shall have more to say about Noah and the Chinese. And this is where we get into the interesting stuff. So, in looking at Chinese history in light of the books of Genesis, it will be helpful to first look at the earliest known religion in China. Later, we will see how this ancient religion fits in with the biblical account of ancient history. So the earliest accounts of religious worship in China is found in the Shujin, I hope I pronounced that right, book of historical book of history of book and of documents, the oldest Chinese historical source. This book records that in the year 2230 BC, the Emperor Shan sacrificed to Shangdi. Okay, this is going to be very, very important, Shangdi. Okay, so that is, he sacrificed to the supreme god of the ancient Chinese, Shangdi meaning supreme ruler. And it became known as the border sacrifice, because at the summer solstice, and the emperor took part of the ceremonies to the earth in the northern border of the country. And at the winter solstice, he offered a sacrifice to heaven on the southern border. So, just kind of, if you want to read or look up the document, that's okay, I'm looking for it. So, the emperor did this twice a year, and it goes back to right there, 2230 BC, and was continued in China for 4,000 years up to the fall of Manchus in AD 1911. Even though people gradually lost the understanding of what the ceremony was, and Shangdi was obscured by all kinds of pagan gods, but the oldest text of the border sacrifice that we have dates from the Ming Dynasty. It is the exact text of the ceremony that was performed in AD 1538, which was based on the existing ancient records of the original rituals. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's see if we... Okay, so the ceremony began. Of old, in the beginning, there was the great chaos, without form and dark. The 5 elements, planets, had not begun to revolve, nor the sun and the moon to shine. In the midst thereof there existed neither forms for sound. Thou, O spiritual sovereign, camest forth in thy presidency, and the first didst divide the grosser parts from the pure. Thou madest heaven, thou madest earth, thou madest man. All things with their reproductive power got their beginning. This recitation praising Shangdi as creator of the heaven and earth sounds surprisingly like the first chapter of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Okay, very interesting, right? You tell me, are we onto something here? So in the earliest records of the Chinese religion, we see that people worshipped one God who was creator of all. And that one God was Shangdi. Okay? And it's comparing things right here. Like this prayer right here. And then these last two, basically reciting the same thing from the Bible and prophecy. You know, but now, O Lord, thou art our Father. We are the clay, and thou our potter, and we are all the work of thy hand. And, you know, thy sovereign goodness is infinite, great and small are sheltered, as engraven of the heart of thy poor servant is the sense of thy goodness. It's comparing it. And then, hold on. And then, in general, reading the text of the border sacrifice reminds one strongly of the prayers of the ancient Hebrews as found in the Old Testament. The same reverent awe before God, the same self-abasement, humility, humility and the gratitude before his greatness. Okay. So, coming down. So, right here, it seems that the most ancient Chinese religion and the ancient Hebrew religion are drawn from the same source. And that is indeed the case, as we shall see. So the first people of China could have heard about the creation, the fall, and life before the flood from Noah himself. And Noah, as we have said, could have learned about these things through one or at most two intermediaries from Adam himself. This gives us an idea of how close were the first Chinese people to the first man, Adam. Okay, so what are we? I'm reading a little bit. Okay, so we know that when the original settlers of China came to their new land, they brought the religion of Noah with them. We know that this border sacrifice of which we spoke earlier, the border sacrifice was like the sacrifice of Noah. Okay, so coming down, and we also got that everything had to do with one God, the creator of the universe, that both Noah and Adam worshipped. And then the prayers of the Chinese border sacrifice resembled that of Noah. Okay, an interesting point to consider is why the Chinese called their sacrifices border sacrifices, and why the emperor traditionally performed them at the border of the empire. We know that Adam would have performed his sacrifices outside the borders of paradise. Is it possible that the Chinese border sacrifice were based on the tradition of a border sacrifice from the time of Adam? The Chinese admire Jewish wisdom. This kind of goes into how a little quote from that Jewish singer, right? I guess that disappeared, or I went too far. Yeah, right here. An Israeli singer. Sorry, Noah, I guess. But so apparently Chinese like Israel. Maybe that's why there's that connection with Goldman Sachs creating bricks. But going down, I think this is gonna end this book right here. Okay, not all these videos are gonna be as long as this one. Okay, so yeah, this ends this one. So the next time, or the document that we'll be going over is going to consider Noah, the flood, and Chinese history. But I thought this was a very interesting way to start this. I got a few that are interesting, and some that are peer review, and some that aren't peer review, but I believe it's worth kind of going over certain theories. I may just like, nah, that doesn't make sense, so I may not, like, I'll include it in the research, but not my timetable. I don't know yet. But I'm definitely going to add this date to the timetable right there. But other than that, ancient Chinese history and the book of Genesis. I hope you enjoyed this. Would love to hear your thoughts and what you think. And there's two other ones that we gotta cover on this, but and I'll do the next one in 2 weeks. The next one, I'm gonna go more. I decided not to do the executive order one. There's too many executive orders, and I got more important things to talk about right now. But I am going to do the Uniting America one next, and I think in that I'm gonna talk about something about like decentralizing corporations, bringing it under like local autonomy. Um, but more into that later, or next week. But until then, I will see you next time. Um, so, and, and this has been the Bible, or China and the Bible series, introducing the Bible Unveiled. And I will see you next time. Follow the hat.